We Are Never Alone by the Spirit Marco Aurélio. Psychographed by Marcelo. Synopsis. This is a story of Heitor, who passed away during the Batman tragedy. Learn about his trajectory and see how the wisdom of life weaves our reunion with our inner truth. We reincarnate immersed in the oblivion of the past. Our mission is to develop our potential and strengthen our weaknesses. The challenge is the fascination of superficial things that blind us from our deepest desires. A windstorm drags us to the corners of life, giving us the illusion that we are lost. But the wisdom of life weaves in silence our reunion with our inner truth on this day. In the relief of the end of all this, the mature understanding reveals to us that in any situation, we are never alone. With your support, the channel helps us to grow. Prologue. The peaceful sky, displaying varied colors, the last rays of sunlight that were lost on the horizon, favor a moment of sublime contemplation. The afternoon said goodbye with delicacy and elegance. Unfortunately, most people were worried about leaving work and heading home, lost in the cause. The city was transformed into the eve of a holiday, and he didn't even have time to notice for a single moment that masterpiece of nature. Heitor was one of the many who didn't pay the slightest attention to that spectacle, squeezed between dozens of other people inside the bus. He only had one goal at that moment: to get home and rest. The driver, disoriented, tried in vain to dodge the cars to get to the final stop faster. So the bus kept looking from one side to the other. Some people couldn't hold on, lost their balance, and fell on others. The man next to Heitor could barely stay standing, and with each new maneuver the driver made, he bumped into and stepped heavily on the boy's foot. After a long journey from the city center to South Zone, and after many more steps, Heitor jumped off, cursing the driver, and the man who lashed his foot gestured and shouted some swear words. "You old fool! If you can't balance, then don't take the bus." He made an obscene gesture with his fingers and hurriedly crossed the street, absorbed in his thoughts. He didn't notice the red light. Pedestrians, and was almost run over. The driver froze a few times. Heitor stuck his head out the car window and shouted, "Hey, you're in a dream, idiot! You're an idiot!" Heitor yelled. The driver started the car and drove off at full speed. Heitor stared at that last car. How unfair! Because some idiots have everything that's good and the best, and I have to always live in sacrifice, because God is the one who gives so much to some and almost nothing to others. Feeling revolted, he ran his hand over his forehead. He wiped the sweat on the lapel of his suit. He looked at the sides and crossed the street, turned onto Skeena and entered the building. He was still ruminating on those thoughts when he was stopped by the doorman, the friend of 601. "The mail arrived just now. The friend could do me the kindness of taking it." Heitor gestured and took the envelopes. How could he be treated like that? Why wasn't he treated like Madame Anita from 902? It could only be because of the money. She was a rich widow and gave large tips to the employees. He had never seen the building's employees treat him with intimacy, but Heitor felt like nothing, a poor wretch. If he didn't have any money, how could he command respect from those people? The doorman smiled and continued. "Take advantage, and also take the 2 letters to your roommate, the friend." Heitor wanted to shout, punch the doorman in the face, demand respect, but he restrained himself. Starting a fight with those people only leads to losses. It was better to swallow his words and let it go. He took a deep breath, took the letters from the doorman, made a brusque gesture with his hands, turned on his heels, and took the elevator. As he went up, he checked the mail. He looked, and suddenly his eyes filled with fury. That pink envelope could only be hers. Alone in the elevator, he shouted in a loud voice, "Doesn't she have anything better to do in life? Why is that?" He started writing again. "I thought I had forgotten, but apparently not." He opened the elevator door with force, and immediately the hallway light came on. Heitor turned left and walked down the long, narrow passage to the last door. The stuffy air in the hallway made him more tired and sweaty. He tried 3 times to fit the key in the lock, but the sweat on his hands didn't help him. The bunch of keys slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor. Just as the hallway light went out, he shouted angrily, "Damn it, I hate this." He bent down, picked up the bunch of keys, and tried again in the dark. "Okay, now I've done it." Upon entering the apartment, he closed the door with force, untied his tie, took off his shoes, and kicked them away. He threw himself on the sofa, looking at the envelope. He said to himself, "Why did I meet this creature? Why can't I disconnect from all these people?" Heitor took the recital letter and threw it on the table next to the sofa. He felt tired because lately he'd been working nonstop. It was hours and hours in the office, dedicating himself to trying to leave the job without holding back. It was a business that required the employees to think about it. Just imagine the next day. Even though it was a holiday, he had set scheduled for trains all day, but they didn't give him any respite until he tried to argue with his boss. But the answer was negative. Heitor was already used to working on holidays, and the extra money he had received for working on the last holiday, Easter, had compensated for the effort. He got up restlessly and walked slowly to the small kitchen. He opened the refrigerator and took out a can of beer. He drank it in one gulp, so thirsty he was, and went back to the living room. He stretched out on the sofa and took off his socks, his eyes fixed on the correspondence on the little table. He raised his arm and in a quick, brusque gesture, grabbed the envelope and stared at it. Poor thing, in the last letter, he wanted me to help my father, who, as I want the old man to go to hell. He never did anything for me, and he still put me in this dreadful world. Ivan, the protege, help him. I won't give them a penny. Clarice, don't bother me. She'll deal with me. Heitor remained like that for a while. He didn't have the slightest desire to open the envelope. I preferred to imagine what was written. As I was thinking about the trivialities that were always put in the lines, he was losing the will to read the letter. A dull anger welled up inside his chest, and he became so irritated that he crumpled the letter and threw it away. I stopped writing a long time ago on purpose. It seems they don't understand that I want distance. They're so ignorant. I sacrificed myself and progressed. I don't want to know about anyone anymore. My family died a long time ago, and after all, why would I have opened this letter? You'll see. Clary wants me to give my father some more of my hard-earned money. You're wrong. I'm tired and full of problems at the office. Why would I waste time with more hassles? I told you I didn't. It's better to throw it away and not have any more hassles. He shook his head from side to side regretfully. He believed he had to make a decision. After all, he now lived in Rio, and it would be unpleasant if his friends found out about his poor past. Listening to his inner voices, he continued speaking. I don't have to make any decision. I already got rid of Clarice when I got the job at Palada. Now I'm free of all this rabble. I don't want them to give a damn about my father's dramas, each to their own problems. After adjusting his tired body along the sofa, he remembered the times of, "When will you get to Rio de Janeiro?" He said to himself in a pained voice. It was difficult, but I made it. I tried hard, and now I'm reaping the first fruits. Everything is difficult, but in the end, with a lot of sacrifice, I'll get where I want to be. Clarice never had anything to do with me. I did the right thing at the right time. I could never marry her. She's not my level, and my father, who never did anything for me, now wants help. Heitor untied his tie. I remember working so hard that day that he barely had time for lunch. He got up, took off his shirt, and went back to the kitchen. That Rubinho could have had comedians to an absurd man cooking who am I to stop? He opened the oven, and nothing. He opened the fridge and found food, but was too lazy to heat it up. He grabbed another can of beer. The fermented drink, when it sank into his empty stomach, caused increasing numbness in Heitor. He took off his pants and shoes and threw himself on the bed. He slowly lost consciousness and then fell asleep. Heitor dreamed he was walking in a place similar to a swamp. He began to feel cold because he was only in his underwear. He tried to hug himself. He looked around, and the appearance was frightening and chilling. The sky, or what seemed to be a cloud, was gray and heavy-looking. He began to walk slowly because he could barely see a hand's breadth away. The few trees he found on the path seemed dry and leafless with twisted branches. His feet stepped on the ground was damp and a fine rain of dark. Fetid water began to fall. Heitor felt a sour smell in the air. He tried to cover his nose. At that moment, he heard someone calling him, "Come here." He frowned and squeezed his eyes slightly. He couldn't see clearly. The call came from inside a small cave. He entered, and when he could see, He felt relieved. "Oh, that friend of Rabinho. What are you doing here?" "They asked me to come and help you. He's very nervous. It's his problem. I have nothing to do with it." The spirit, in the form of a woman with an expressive look, tried to conciliate. "Yes, you are too quiet, and the Quisari is a trail of dense energy from the lower astral. It's easy to find you. You can locate it whenever you want. You need to burn it. Always clear. You are not in my skin. Improve the content of your thoughts. Your mind is intoxicated by negative thoughts. If you don't change yours." Hector shrugged. Suddenly, they heard screams near the grotto. Heitor despaired. The woman, using all her firmness, ordered, "Apologize for what you did to Clarice." "I'm not asking. I got myself out of a big mess. I didn't do anything wrong." "He doesn't understand. He thinks you hurt her. Come on, apologize." Hector couldn't concentrate because the screams were getting closer and closer. He turned his head back. She still tried to warn him. "Don't look, Heitor. It's too late." Heitor's eyes filled with horror before that dirty, poorly dressed man, his eyes bloodshot with fury. "What do you want from me, you scoundrel? I swear I'm going to kill you." "I never hurt you," the old man shouted angrily. "You hurt my daughter. I didn't do what I thought was best. She didn't have the structure to live in Belo Horizonte. You denied her the chance to grow up and be happy. You betrayed me behind my back. I betrayed nothing. She never was, never will be the woman of the big city." Heitor turned to ask for help, but the lady had disappeared. The man took advantage of the young man's moment of distraction and angrily attacked his neck. "You wretch, you have to repair the damage. You have to do something for her." Heitor was suffocating. He felt the air leaving his lungs, making him lose consciousness. He woke up gasping for breath with thick drops of sweat running down his forehead. God forbid, and keep him from having another nightmare. He let out a long sigh and remembered the old man. What a man that was. His face seemed familiar to me, but it could only be a bad dream. I've never been one for fighting. I've never done anything to be hated like that, trying to push away the unpleasant sensation of the dream. Heitor let out a sigh, got up, and turned on the television, began to massage his feet, paying little attention to the news. About 200,000 people held a march today from Candelaria to Sinolandia in another popular demonstration demanding the establishment of direct elections for president in the country. The direct campaign has already begun. Heitor stood up and turned off the device as if that would do any good. He went back to the living room, picked up the crumpled envelope from the floor, and threw the beer cans into a trash can. He felt hungry and went back to the refrigerator. He grabbed a pan and a mixer. "I'll leave them in the bath." Maria, while taking a shower, left everything ready and walked to the bathroom. He leaned over the sink and observed a reflection in the mirror. He lifted her face and ran her hands around it. What a surprise to see finger marks all over her neck. "It can't be," she exclaimed. "It can't be." She opened and closed her eyes a few times. She looked at herself in the mirror again. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm scaring myself for nothing, letting myself be impressed by these pointless dreams. I need a good shower. Yes, that's right. She ran the towel over her face and turned on the shower valve. She put her head in the hot water, letting it run down her tired body. He didn't even imagine that moments before his peri-spirit had detached itself from his physical body, and thus he had come into contact with the spirit world. While he was distracted taking a shower, he didn't register the presence of the spirit that had tried to attack him minutes before in the dream. In a corner of the bathroom, with a thick voice and furious eyes, the spirit raged. "You promised. You betrayed our trust and harmed my daughter's life. If you don't help her, I'll make your life a hell. You'll pay me dead or alive." Chapter 1 at 16, Heitor appeared older, his expression mature, having been the result of the hard life on the farm, water with a lot of work and a lot of sun. For him, life was unfair, as harsh as work in the fields. Since he was little, he felt like a poor devil. He always questioned himself, "I don't have anything, and the others don't have anything. Why did God commit this injustice to me?" The complaint grew until the moment came when his few friends left, unable to bear that speech. Tiring and unproductive, On the far without friends, Heitor's attention was focused on Clarice, who at that time was 13. Years old, although she was 3 years younger than him, she appeared to be the same age as Hector. She was a pretty girl. She had a slender body, dark skin tanned by the sun, naturally curly hair always tied up with a scarf. She had bright and expressive olive-colored eyes. Unfortunately, years before, when climbing a jabuticaba tree and trying to pick up the fruit, she lost her balance. She was a considerable height, losing some teeth and getting a huge scar on her forehead. Over time, without resources for a prosthesis, her upper lip began to fall, and her cheeks arum, making her an unattractive girl.